There's no system. And this is a desperate thought for people. What do you mean there's no system? And I said, you're kind of on your own. Yeah, but I need to be saved.
What if we paid teachers on two different bases? One would be on value production, meaning they actually receive royalties on the productivity and value they create in students. So they could get a long chain of royalties on creating effective students and attract the best teachers in the world to become the greatest teachers in the world.
I see complete consistency today of your basic education that served you well throughout your life. Keep freeing yourself up from other people's systems.
Oh, that is the best system of all.
That's the greatest system of all. Hi, everybody. This is the next episode of Capability Amplifier, and I'm here with my equally totally unpredictable partner, Mike Koenigs. But Mike, from time to time, there's a topic that we keep landing on. It's like we're running across the swamp on lily pads, but we've never really gone that deep on it, and the future of education, period, the future of education. And I think we're fairly resonant and both like-minded about this particular topic because we've had, like most entrepreneurs, a very, very indifferent relationship with the formal educational system, wherever from I was before nursery school. I was before kindergarten. You just started first grade and you went through 12, and then maybe you went to college, maybe you didn't go to college and everything else. But in 34 years of coaching entrepreneurs, I was trying to figure out, I've coached 7,000 entrepreneurs in 49 years, and I can remember on less than two hands any entrepreneur who made any big deal about how they were educated and when they went to education. And so I just feel that being an entrepreneur is the educational system for entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
So what do you think? What do you think about that?
Well, I'm going to answer your question, and I'm going to give you two provocateur statements that I want to go down the pathway with you. So obviously, I totally agree because
so if I understand it right, you're trying to provoke me?
I am going to be asking a provocative question and making a provocative statement, not to you necessarily, but I'm going to start by agreeing because I never went to college. I am a kinesthetic learner, which means I learn by doing and absorbing, not by listening and watching necessarily. I can do that, but my brain's not tuned to it. So I did not succeed at all. I was a terrible student, couldn't function, and I literally never did homework once. If I couldn't figure out how to outsource it or convince someone else to do my work for me, I found shortcuts. And the good news is it trained my brain in a certain way, but also it's just like I didn't have an effective way to absorb. So I have a couple thoughts, and the first one of which is I believe teachers should become multi-millionaires. I think teachers' unions protect the worst, and we have a failed education system, certainly in the United States, and our college system creates what I would say are slaves through the banking system and through the system. And if I've heard before that the majority of all expenses in colleges now are in administrations and bureaucracies, not in the education. And I believe in pure research for pure research's sake. So what if we paid teachers on two different bases? One would be on value production, meaning they actually received royalties on the productivity and value they create in students. So they could get a long chain of royalties on creating effective students and attract the best teachers in the world to become the greatest teachers in the world. Now, the exception to that is social responsibility. So if you're working with difficult children or special needs children, I think there should be a mercy bonus as well, because I think that creates for a strong society, a strong moral
Sort of
base.
like hazardous duty pay.
Very precisely. It's sort of like it's like providing a multiplier for their heart. So, and an example of this is not long ago I spoke on stage at a Dave Asprey event, and I always call out to the audience and I ask to bring someone on and I do a hot seat with them. And now we've been using AI, and I'll basically use generative AI to solve a big business problem or create an app on the fly or create whatever in 10 minutes. And in this case, I said, is there someone here who wants to create and launch a business? And Dave said, call on Alan, his 14-year-old son. So his gangly son walks up on stage and I say, Alan, what would you like to create or do? And he says, well, I want to create a business and it'll be a gaming PC gaming computer. And I'm like, well, how are you going to make it different? And he said, well, I want to make a 3D printed head case. The first one will be of my dad, but you could order a custom head case. And I go, well, let's create the business now. So we typed up some commands and built a website right before the audience and created the specifications and then started writing a book. And you could see he got all lit up. And he said, what would it take to publish? And I just said, you can do this, and you can do this. Well, within 48 hours of walking off that stage, he'd already written 50 pages of his book, and less than 2 weeks later, it was launched. But before that happened, after we built this, and you could see the excitement, I said, that is the future of entrepreneurship. What you just witnessed there is, imagine being able to help young people, 12 or 13 or 14, create and launch their first businesses, become multi-millionaires before they're of age so they could go to college because they want to learn more. Maybe they want to participate in peer research instead of believing the illusion that they're going to get a job, which is not true because the amount of garbage that's taught in these organizations that has no value. But also they'd never walk away indentured servants trying to pay off student loans for the rest of their lives. And of course, the audience went nuts for that. They loved it. But I truly believe it, because I think right now the idea of being a mentor and being an apprentice is what our country, our world needs, is to create more entrepreneurs who learn at an early age on the basis of creating value and being rewarded for it. So there you go. That's my pitch to see. And what I want to ask you is, first of all, your thoughts on that. But then secondly, I want to ask you the Dan Sullivan question about projecting into the future of education 10 and 20 years from now.
Yeah, well, my way of looking at it is that when you have a shift in the economy, whatever educational system was in place for the previous economy is already being bypassed. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And my sense is that it's always the entrepreneurial class that creates the educational system, not necessarily for society. They just create it for themselves personally, and then they do it for like-minded people who are like them, and they communicate and they create a whole new curriculum that just bypasses the existing the existing system. So my feeling is that near the end of one economic system, which has been essentially the last 40 years, since probably, since the first personal computers arrived on the scene in the late 70s, Commodore and, all that individuals, mostly young people, were already taking that personal computer and they were essentially creating a new learning system for themselves. I won't call it an educational system, but it's a new learning system. Mm-hmm. Okay, and I picked the 70s because the previous educational system came in the United States anyway. Formal education came in the 1840s and 1830s was when we were switching from an agricultural system to an industrial system.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And up until that point, there had been no formal education system. Like there wasn't a system. There wasn't a system. There were church schools. There were small town schools, and usually it only got you till about 13 or 14 years old when most people started being workers.
Yep.
And so that the U.S. system started in Massachusetts. It was the first state that had a formal educational system. The guy who designed it was a guy named Horace Mann,
Mm-hmm.
and then he caught on as a thought leader here, and the other states started looking at the Massachusetts model, and they started so it went across the country. And all the states weren't there yet in the 1830s and 1840s. Maybe about half the states were there. So you had the whole, everything west of the Mississippi they weren't really states. They weren't really states yet. They were territories. And, you basically learned from your parents, you learned from adults who were around you, but there wasn't anything formal about it. And so it took about 40 years before the primary school, it was just primary school first, and then around the end of the 1800s, you started to have high school. Now the Catholic school was always there, and this is one of the big worries because the Catholic schools came in, and you always had parish schools right from the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, from the moment the Catholics arrived, they had their own schools, and it was to raise kids to be Catholics.
Yep.
And then, and it was a great worry on the part of the anti-Catholic, especially the anti-Catholic. Canada is a Catholic country. More than the half the population is Catholic from a religious standpoint.
I didn't know that.
In the United States, it was always a minority. And a lot of the rebellion on the part of people was first of all, it starts with the Protestant Reformation, is to eliminate the power and the influence of the Catholic Church. So in the U.S., there was always this anti-Catholic, which actually just strengthened the Catholic community.
Yeah,
they
of course.
knew they were,
Nothing better than an enemy to make us all stronger.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, but, it was a big deal when Kennedy got elected president. He was the first Catholic president. And there was a lot of suspicion. He had to prove that he wasn't going to be taking orders from the Vatican and everything like that.
Yeah.
So that system really persisted. And basically what it was is we were going to teach children how to put up with boredom for their industrial work lives, And I remember first grade, Sister Mary Josephia, that was my first grade teacher, nun, and she said the reason why what you're going to learn this year and the next 11 years after this, 12th grade, is that you're going to learn everything you need to go out into the world, because we're going to show you exactly how you have to perform and how you have to conform in order to make a life after your 12th grade. And, it was a very accurate prediction, and you tell me the first grade teacher today that can predict what life is going to be like 12 years from now.
Wow.
It isn't anything that the teachers are experiencing, I can tell you that. Mm-hmm. So I think you're really onto something, but my feeling is all systems start failing near the end of a fundamental change in the economy, and starting with personal computers, starting with software, starting with the internet, starting with apps, like having lots of apps, and then probably the iPhone, and I think now artificial intelligence. You got about 6 planks where more and more children, when they come to school, they treat it like it's storage for 5 hours when they're not expected to think, they're not expected to learn anything.
Right.
But before they got to school, they were involved with their technology. And at 3 o'clock, they get to go out. Now they get to go back to the real educational system.
Yes. Well, there's I'm going to plus what you just said, because here's what I believe is going to happen is,
and all you did is prove it on stage.
Yeah, that and
plus your son created the Peter Diamandis and Tony Robbins discussion. How long did it take him? Was it a day?
It was 4 hours. So I gave him a big deadline. So he started at about 10 at night and he had it done at 2 a.m.
Yeah, we demonstrated that on a previous podcast.
We did. That got, by the way.
You did. I sat there and said, wow, that was amazing.
I got so many great comments from that. And,
it was actually very humorous. They made.
Yeah.
I don't know if Peter and Tony found it humorous, but it was really fun. I found it very humorous.
Yeah. Peter thought it was funny and actually showed it at a recent, I did a new training for Tony's, some of his what he calls his platinum partners, his lions. And it got a lot of, they thought it was very good. And there's an add-on to that. So there's two thoughts. One of them is right now, Zach, we created a little business for him where he's now creating audiobooks for authors, because as you know, creating audiobooks is a lot of work. You typically, if you're not a really good one-off, one-take speaker, you have to fly somewhere, go into a studio, talk for a couple days and do stuff over and over and over again. It sucks. So what we did is built a little AI tool where you sample your voice and then you can import the book and it generates chapters of the book with AI voice. And it sounds really good. Like, it's so good. It's pretty much indiscernible. And it varies the cadence and the structure. It kind of makes almost micro mistakes. So it's so human. And, for like $2,500, he'll do a whole book where if you have to pay someone and go into a studio, it's days or weeks of time, and it's very expensive. So,
and it's god awful boring too.
Yeah, it's terrible. So anyway, he's already got a lot of people raising their hands saying, will you do this for me? And by the way, you can also do a Spanish, Italian, Portuguese, Hindi, French version of your book and not have to know the language. And it's pretty good. It's very passable. But moving on, there's one other point I wanted to make, which is I believe precisely what you're saying about the disruption. So historically, one of the things that made Catholic education work, and I'm sure any kind of educational is, and I can't remember what it's called. It's a very Catholic-y word about, it's learning the basic moral principles. It's not catechism. It's not, but there's a word for it, but it's some fundamental structures about what's right, what's wrong, good and bad. But it's a framework about what you're here for. You're here to serve God and to give glory and whatever that, I can't remember again what it's called, but at my dad's funeral.
You're preparing for two worlds. You're preparing for your life in this world, and then so that you go to the next world.
Precisely. Exactly.
Yeah, we had one of our early podcasts. I said, the neat thing about, and my bias is toward Christianity because that's Christianity is the first religion that promised two lives.
Yeah. So I don't remember what that's called, but it was the way they were taught during the early days of their education. So it turns out that the priest who is doing my dad's funeral also happened to be my principal from high school who married me in my first time as well. So I've got a good...
Probably baptized you too.
He didn't baptize me. That guy's dead.
He'd be 110 or something.
But if we would have raised Zach as a Christian, I married into the Jewish thing, and that was my deal I made with my wife. Is he got my last name and he was raised as a Jew, but he's got two identities.
He was a Jew anyway because the mother's a Jew.
That's right. So in any case, he was talking about how my dad was raised and what he believed and how this created this great framework and how, part of what made that work, precisely what you're saying, is you have a positive forward-seeking future, even in your death. So right away, you're given certainty. What are you here for? To give glory to God. You are an agent, effectively, and that you're going to be rewarded with this afterlife. And so it's sort of like it takes care of your present day thinking and your future thinking. Which that does not exist now. That's been taken away. And you really see, like, man, there's a lot of power in providing that framework. And my dad was a very certain man, and he just made his decisions very quickly. Nope, it's wrong. He had very, very clear ethical boundaries. There was no mushy. Now, it didn't mean he was right about everything, but he was right most of the time about most things, because he just would never cross the line. Now, get more clients, grow your business with better marketing and messaging. Make more money and get a better life with more freedom of time, money, relationship, and impact. Learn more about our 3-day one-on-one done-with-you reinvention workshop. Visit connecttomike.com to book a conversation with me right now. All right, back to the episode. Getting back to the education style, as we move forward, here's what I really realized when I was doing this thing and teaching my son AI, and he's doing his business stuff, and then young 14-year-old Alan Asprey, and this whole idea of, wow, you can invent something and make it happen and do it now. We've moved to a point where linear education is not necessary, meaning now you have a companion. You can have this AI companion, and in the near future, it'll be something like your phone that listens to everything and knows what's going on and becomes an augmentation. And it doesn't mean... But
I think it's already happening.
Our phones already are, but the distinction is now it can coach you. So, whether you've got augmented reality glasses and you could be a mechanic or a repairman, and you've got every manual for every device ever made at your fingertips, and it image recognizes, and basically it's saying, put this here and do this and do this. But you can learn on the job, you can create on the job and add value on the job. But it can also be a creative amplifier as well, a creative capability amplifier.
A capability amplifier. There should be a podcast.
There should be. So getting back to being the mentor and the apprentice, because the systems are going to learn and contribute just as you are. And it certainly can make for slaves, but it can also make for immense, just the amount of great creative collaboration that this enables, and for like a you and I to be able to be on opposite parts of the world and have real-time voice translation, for scientists to be able to collaborate, that cross over any language, any barrier, any border, which can happen right now. It's a little clunky yet, but it's this far away. And
the distance between Monday and the future is always constant. It's actually what's happening on Monday that really matters.
Explain that. I want to understand exactly what you mean.
Well, I told Peter, we were having a discussion, and I said, one thing about the future, when you get there, it seems normal. And I think a lot of futurism is a form of secular religion, in the sense that people want to be saved by the future. They want all the bad things about society, they want it to think. But I said, there is no future. There's just what everybody is kind of looking forward for the next couple of days.
Yeah.
That's the actual future. But people say, well, that doesn't matter. It's the future that we have to get to. And I said, well, I've never spent a second in the future, and I've never spent a second in the past. My only experience, I'm pushing 80. I'll be 80 next year, and as far as I can remember, it's all been today.
Yeah.
I've never. So I just decided.
The power of now. I hear you.
Yeah. Well, we have different ideas about what's happening right now.
Yeah.
Like what's happening right now. But the other thing there is no system. I think what's disappeared is systems. There were systems 40 years ago,
Mm.
you know, and the reason is because industrialization created systems. They created systems of standardization, and you conformed
Mm-hmm.
to the system.
Yep.
And I would say the moment that you get the first person who gets a personal computer, the system is there. There are no systems.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I said, why are you spending the time trying to create a better system when it's impossible to have systems? You have networks. You have networks.
Mm.
And everything. I just don't think system. There's no healthcare system. There's no educational system. There are certain great places where you can get great healthcare, and there are certain places where you can get great education, but that's a function of a specific situation in a specific place.
Mm.
I mean, if I had Mike Koenigs as my dad, that's the system.
Mm.
There's no system. And this is a desperate thought for people. What do you mean there's no system? And I said, you're kind of on your own. Yeah, I need to be saved. Remember, you were sitting at the table. We were at A360,
Yep.
and the mission commander for NASA put up the new telescope. Was there the woman from Arkansas?
Yeah.
And one of the questions that came to her was, any indication with this new sensing device out there, which is about, it's not 20 times better, it's just almost like infinitely better than the previous telescope. And she says, no, there's no indication whatsoever. We have a set of criteria that if there's other intelligent life in the universe, there's a checkbox to say, there's a regular, some sort of pattern that's coming out, and we can sense the structure. So we haven't picked up anything like that.
Yeah.
So Peter asked the audience, how many of you believe there's intelligent life elsewhere in the universe? And everybody raised their hand except one person. And he says, is there anyone who doesn't believe there's intelligent life in the universe? And I said, I don't. So Peter didn't dwell on me. And then we had a podcast, and he said, you raised your hand. You don't believe there's other intelligence in the universe? And I said, no, I think it's just, and I said, it's not that I don't believe it. I said, it's not something to believe in.
Yeah.
And I said, I think it's just foolish thinking.
Yep.
That distracts you from just focusing on the intelligent life that you have here, including your own. I said, I think it's a form of secular religion. It's like wanting the Messiah to come.
Yeah.
Because their notion is that they're always superior to us, and they're going to be like the proper parent who teaches us, or we're just food. We're just food, and they just want to eat us. But I said, I think it's this childlike wanting to be saved.
Yeah.
Anyway, so my sense is this is the toughest part of the transition. We're going, that everything's made up, nobody's in charge, and life's not fair.
Yep.
And you want someone to be in charge, and you want life to be fair, and you don't want to believe that you just have to make it all up.
Yeah.
I have had more response to that book than any other book.
Yeah. I use that all the time. I give you credit and I go, Dan says, and I've been using that even when I talk to my son. It'll be like, anytime I get a rules-based argument back, or if you're dealing with a crazy person who wants to talk about some conspiratorial something or other, I'm like, I don't know. Why don't you just try this one on? So it's genius. It's genius. So I've won.
No, but here's the thing about it is that you're paying attention to his creation, and Dave Ashbury's son. That's the
Alan.
educational system, right? I mean, if there is an educational system, that's the educational system. And they said, yeah, but we want to do it for all kids. And I said, you don't have access to all
Yeah,
kids.
no.
You only have access. As a matter of fact, I've only got direct access to one human being for 79 years.
Yeah. Yep. That
I mean,
that and your hallucination that goes along with it, right?
yeah,
That would you choose to believe, and the filter you push everything through. So I'm going to ask you one last question.
I think you're calm about this.
Oh.
I'm calm about this. I'm calm about this. So why are we calm when we don't have a system supporting us?
I'd say we have confidence in our past.
We've taken ownership.
Yeah. But we need a higher authority in charge of that.
Yeah.
So let me ask you one.
Well, you were asking me the question, what do I see in the future?
Yeah, that's how I want to project into the future and say, what's your projection 3, 5, 10 years from now? It could be 20, it could be whatever, based upon what you've seen right now. It doesn't have to be based on anything. What do you believe is going to happen to the educational system? Not system, but the possibility of what will influence more and more children in the world that we're moving towards?
We won't know anything more about it 20 years from now than we know today.
No more certainty than we have today.
Well, you have certainty about certain things, don't you?
Mm-hmm.
I know you avoid a lot of trouble in life if you show up on time, do what you say you're going to do, finish what you start, say please and thank you. I know that about 95% of the trouble you can get into, I know that.
Yep.
And I know everybody who tries to break those 4 rules gets punished for it.
Yep. Fair enough.
The people who pay attention to that more than any other people are entrepreneurs.
Yeah, you don't do it, you don't have clients.
You don't show up on time, you don't have a client. Okay? You don't do what you say you're going to do, you don't get a check. Okay? You don't finish what you start, you don't get any referrals. Okay? You don't say please and thank you, and everybody thinks you're a jerk.
Yeah.
So here's the thing. I think you actually
that's a good system.
I think you actually have an educational system, Mike, and it's everything you learned, everything you didn't learn in school is your educational system. And when did you take ownership for your own direction in life? At what age did you? No, I'm not saying you felt good about it. I'm just saying when you actually did.
I think the one that I know for sure is on my 16th birthday, when I could legally work, I took what became basically a full-time job. I worked at the local gas station in town, and to me, it represented financial independence, never asking for a dollar from
not being a burden to your parents.
And I wanted freedom. Like, my goal, as long as I can remember, is getting out of that little town and being an adult. You and I have talked about that quite a bit. And that was like, that's all I wanted to do, is be an adult. And I remember the day I turned 18, I felt free. And I used to say, I can't wait till I'm 18, because then I'm legally, I'm out of here. And back then 18 also was when you were of legal drinking age. So there was that rite of passage, at least in your mind. And I left home basically right away. And so I think though, where I was really, really conscious of it, and I felt like it was possible, I was 14 when I taught myself how to program, and I was like, this is my freedom, my ticket to freedom. And then 16, taking the job, and that's when I had financial freedom. And then at 18, when I was legally free.
Yeah. But I see a complete consistency between how you were with a job and with teaching yourself how to program. I see a complete consistency today of your basic education that served you well throughout your life. So I think uh, it's kind of like keep freeing yourself up from other people's systems.
Oh, that is the best system of all.
That's the greatest system of all.
Oh my God. That is the hook for the whole show, by
That
the
is
way.
the system.
The
system is to free yourself up from other people's systems. How's that?
That is it. The greatest education system in the world. Wait for it. Wait for it. Okay. Well, let's leave it at that, because
what do you think, though? I think we open new territory for
this
a lot
is good.
of people.
I mean, this is like this is the best synthesis. I've been thinking about how to communicate this, and I've got to know, by the way. So here's the irony of it all. Next week, I'm speaking at MIT on AI at the Media Lab, and for YPO. So the irony, of course, is I have no education, and I'm going to say that, and I'm going to use this as an opening salvo, and I've been asked to be very provocative. So basically, without being a total jerk, I'm going to say our complete educational system's a wreck, and some of the talking points I had in here.
No, all educational systems are a wreck, and there's no system.
Yeah, this is great. So you just put the
no, I mean, MIT, I just got the Wall Street Journal this morning, and it listed the top colleges and universities in the state, and it was the top two were Princeton and MIT. Okay. I don't know anything about Princeton, but I do know MIT has the largest number of startups when people are in their undergraduate year.
Oh my God.
Undergraduate years of MIT. I mean, MIT is the greatest generator of startup entrepreneurial companies. I think they have no competition.
I think Stanford's got a bunch too on the California side.
Caltech,
but MIT by far, and going through there. So I was there with Peter, and then we went and visited Dean Kamen a couple weeks ago during the longevity trip. And I got to tell you, I walked into MIT and I'm like, I want to be here. I would love to dedicate time to incubate and work in an environment that the whole campus is designed that forces people to bump into each other. It's very like Apple did this and Microsoft did too. It's like create natural pathways to essentially create accidental collaborations. And now
it's really interesting. The exceptions to the rule, I mentioned the two hands, people who talked about their education.
Yeah.
And they're all the people who either went to West Point or Annapolis.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, because if you look at the Fortune 500 corporations in the United States, the most prevalent people who end up as CEOs of Fortune 500 corporations, there's a heavy military background to a lot of them.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And we got Gary Claiborne, who's a free zone. He's a West Point graduate. And he talks about it a lot, but it was they had a learning experience that gave you from the first day that you were at West Point. They always gave you twice as much stuff to do than you had time for.
Yeah.
And you had to make choices.
Yeah. And prevent idle hands from doing the devil's work. But yes, no.
You had to make choices, and the people who always made good choices given the available situation just went right to the top. Right to the top, and you're going to have to get people killed off, and you can't let that bother you. You got to win the battle.
Yeah.
Regardless, So. I mean, I couldn't possibly be in an environment like that. I would see it as a waste of my time. So I wouldn't have gone to college except for the college that I went to, which was reading the great books of the Western world. One, I like to read, but my whole takeaway from it, I think, is probably unique. And that is, how do you create ideas that last forever? That was my main lesson. How do you create ideas that last forever? How do you write? How do you create books that people are still reading seriously 2,500 years later? That's all I wanted to know. I just wanted to know how you create great ideas.
Yeah.
I wrote an essay. I started the college newspaper, and I said, any of the people that we study here, none of them would come with any distance. They wouldn't get near this place because you worship great thinkers. And that's not that seems to me that's just the opposite of what they wanted to happen.
Yeah.
So anyway, but I think that it's gaining freedom from systems is the greatest system.
Yeah. Well, that's a perfect place to end this episode. And I'll wrap this up by saying, what a bunch of breakthroughs. I took more notes in this time around. I've been typing like furiously in the background, and I've got tons of great ideas.
You see, I didn't even know you were doing that. You really have a gift for not seeming like you're taking notes.
Well, it helps me think. And like one thing I do, I always have a transcript running because I don't always trust what I think my brain and my ears are hearing, but I love to pay attention to the words. And when I get to type,
it's your thinking.
Kinesthetic.
It's actually your thinking that matters. It's not.
It is, but
it's your thinking about your thinking that really.
Yes, but my applied hallucinations are super useful. So my interpretation of what I think I'm hearing are the notes I'm taking. And then I look at the words and I'm like, oh, I didn't even hear that through the thought process. And my kinesthetic brain loves the implementation because right away from here, I can use what we've done to make more cool things, or hopefully to create not just ideas that last forever, but creations that are unique with these ideas, because it's just that little nuance that you pick up and boom, it's a brand new avenue that who knows if it's been explored before, right? The combination of timing and technology and who we are, all these original things that are being made, at least that's the illusion or hallucination I choose to believe.
Seems to me like you've created a lot of good techniques for being Mike Koenigs.
Still works, and I'm never bored. So that's the best part. Never a dull moment. That's what I was going to change to my title. Instead of CEO, I'm just going to be never a dull moment. What do you think of that?
Yeah.
All right.
Yes.
Well, this is a good place to put it in. So as usual,
wrap it up, Mike. Wrap it up.
Here's the best thing you can do as our loyal listener and viewer is if you enjoyed this, share it with someone who could benefit from it. And we love those 5 stars and those comments. And of course, subscribe if you're watching this on podcast. And as usual, it's always a pleasure. It's always a joy. You're one of my absolute favorite people in the whole wide world to create and collaborate with, Dan Sullivan, probably the number one.
Well, it's cool.
All right.
And neither of us knows what we're going to say next. And that's a good way to approach life.
It's like throwing silverware down the stairs, a big box of silverware. So that is Capability Amplifier, and we'll see you in the next episode. Bye-bye.